What if I told you that a decision made in Washington, Brussels, or Beijing could quietly make your phone more expensive, your imported jeans costlier, or even your favorite tea harder to get, even if you live halfway around the world? Welcome to the hidden ripple effects of tariffs, a kind of tax you probably hear about only in news headlines, but one that's secretly affecting your wallet, your choices, and the global economy. Today, we're going deep into how tariffs affect you. Yes, you, even if you're not in the US. By the end, you'll see the supply chain in a new light and maybe rethink how global trade really connects to your everyday life. Let's dive in. Before we see how tariffs reach beyond borders, let's clarify what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax or duty imposed by a government on goods when they cross its border, usually imports. The goal? Sometimes revenue for the government, sometimes protecting local industries by making foreign goods more expensive, sometimes as bargaining chips in trade negotiations. That sounds simple, but it's the downstream effects that get interesting. A few key features to remember. Pass through to consumers. When importers pay a tariff, they often pass at least part of that cost onto the consumer via higher prices. That means your imported gadget, clothing, or packaged food may quietly include a tariff tax baked in. Reduced import volume and product selection. As imports become more expensive, fewer are brought in. That can lead to fewer choices on shelves or online. Some niche foreign goods might vanish entirely. Effects on intermediate goods. It's not just the final imported product. Many goods incorporate imported parts/materials. Tariffs on those parts raise the cost of domestic manufacturing too. Retaliation and trade wars. If country A imposes tariffs on country B, B might retaliate. That escalates into a trade war with multiple goods and sectors hit. So when you see tariffs on steel or tariffs on electronics from China, the effect isn't local, it's global. We need a concrete example, so let's look at the recent surge of US tariffs, because even from thousands of miles away, they ripple outward. In 2025, the US imposed sweeping tariffs, in many cases 10% to 50%, on imports from dozens of countries. The average effective US tariff rate across all these new measures has shot up significantly, reaching levels not seen in over a century. According to the Budget Lab, the cumulative effect of the 2025 tariffs could raise price levels by around 2.3% in the near term, equivalent to an average per household loss of $3,800 in purchasing power. What does that mean in real life? Consumer prices rising. Many US goods that depend on imported parts or raw materials are becoming more expensive. Automobiles, electronics, appliances, all are under pricing pressure. Domestic producers get some protection, US manufacturers in steel, aluminum, or specific sectors benefit because foreign competition is more expensive. But that comes at cost. Exporters from other countries hurt. If you're an exporter to the US, your goods suddenly face an added cost or worse sales. That reduces export demand. Retaliation makes it worse. Countries hit by tariffs often respond with their own. That spreads the damage beyond the original targeted trade. Thus, what begins as US policy becomes a shock that travels globally. Now, if you live in India, Brazil, South Africa, or anywhere outside the US, how do you feel about this? Let's trace the channels. Channel 1. Export dependency and demand shock. If your country exports to the US, or any major economy imposing tariffs, your exporters may face reduced demand. That can lead to layoffs, factory slowdowns, or currency pressures. The World Bank warns US tariffs on Indian exports could slow growth in South Asia. More broadly, tariffs reduce global growth and demand. The PIIE finds that U.S. tariffs significantly lower both U.S. and global growth and raise inflation in many economies. Trade flows globally could shrink by 4% to 9%, according to BBVA. If your country is export-oriented, especially in textiles, agriculture, or intermediate goods, this matters. Channel 2. Cost of inputs/supply chains. Many economies are structurally linked to global supply chains. Even if your country doesn't import from the US, you may import from countries affected by US tariffs, or your raw materials may be sourced from such countries. Suppose an Indian factory buys machinery from Germany, which sells to the US and is hit by tariffs. German exports slow. The factory scales down. Parts get delayed. Indirect effects cascade. Also, tariffs on intermediate inputs raise the cost of final goods even in domestic markets. McKinsey notes that tariff changes meaningfully affect business, consumer, and government spending, and trade flows ripple. Channel 3. Currency and capital flows. Tariffs can influence capital flows. If a country looks riskier because its exports are hit, investment might shift away. In some cases, the impact on the trading balance or terms of trade can cause currency depreciation, making imports more expensive. There's also a terms of trade effect. When a large country imposes tariffs, it might alter world prices in a way that paradoxically hurts itself or others, e.g., Lerner paradox. Channel 4. Inflation price pressure globally. When major economies impose tariffs, global inflation pressures rise. That spreads through commodity markets, shipping costs, energy prices, and so on. The PIIE shows tariffs increasing inflation in many economies. Tariffs contribute to broader price increases. The Budget Lab estimates a 2.3% price rise from recent U.S. tariffs. Even the U.S. Federal Reserve finds that tariffs translate fairly quickly, within months, into higher consumer goods prices. Deloitte warns that higher input costs filter through entire supply chains. Thus, imported food, components, or finished goods anywhere can become more expensive. Let's make this more concrete. Here are specific ways you could feel tariffs' impact, no matter where you live. 4.1. Higher consumer prices, electronics, and gadgets. Many devices include components from multiple countries. Tariffs somewhere in the chain push up costs. Clothing and fashion. Textiles and garments are traded globally. Tariffs on raw fabrics or finished apparel can inflate retail prices. Food and beverages. Tariffs on agricultural imports, e.g. coffee, tea, exotic fruit, can make those goods pricier or less available. Automobiles/parts. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, or car parts increase car costs, even outside the US. 4.2. Fewer choices/product diversity. Some niche or luxury imported goods may vanish because importers no longer want to pay the tariff burden. 4.3. Slower economic growth and job risk. If your country is export-oriented, jobs may be affected. Factories might reduce output, or foreign investment might slow. 4.4. Volatility in currency or inflation. Tariff shocks contribute to macro uncertainty. This can affect inflation, interest rates, currency stability, all of which ripple into your financial life. Mortgages, loans, imports. 4.5. Indirect effects via trade relationships. If trade tensions escalate, your country might be drawn in via alliances, counter-tariffs, or disrupted global agreements. Example: if the US imposes tariffs on Indian exports, India might retaliate or shift trade. South Asia's growth could slow. Tariffs are tricky. Let's clarify some common misconceptions and paradoxes. Myth 1. Only the foreign exporter pays the tariff. Reality: the importer pays, and then the importer or consumer usually bears the cost through higher prices. Myth 2. Tariffs always protect domestic jobs and industries. In the short term, that may happen for certain sectors, but overall productivity can suffer. Industries that rely on imports of components suffer. Retaliation and trade wars can destroy export sectors. Innovation may be stifled due to less competition. Paradox. Metzler paradox. In rare theoretical cases, imposing a tariff could lower the domestic price of an imported good if the effect on trade terms is strong. But this is largely academic and not seen in real markets. Paradox. Learner paradox. Under specific conditions, imposing a tariff can worsen a country's terms of trade. These paradoxes exist in economic theory, but real-world trade is messier. Okay, it sounds bleak, but there are levers to reduce damage. Here's what you, companies, and governments can do. For individuals/consumers, be price aware. Notice when prices jump unexpectedly. That could be tariff pass-through. Compare local versus imported. Sometimes a domestic alternative may now be cheaper or comparable. Follow trade news. Tariff announcements often precede price changes. Support local industries smartly. If local production is viable and quality is good, shifting demand helps reduce reliance on tariff-vulnerable imports. For businesses, rethink sourcing and supply chains. Diversify suppliers from multiple countries to avoid exposure to one trade policy. Localize production. Bring more production closer to the market, so fewer cross-border costs. Lock in contracts/hedging. Where possible, negotiate fixed prices before tariff changes hit. Shift to higher value-add products. Focus on innovation or niche goods less susceptible to tariff competition. For governments and policymakers, trade diplomacy and negotiation. Use free trade agreements or tariff exemptions to protect strategic imports. Smart tariff design. Rather than blanket tariffs, tailor them to sectors or parts to reduce collateral damage. Support vulnerable sectors. Provide subsidies, training, or incentives for industries affected by foreign tariffs. Retaliation carefully. Counter tariffs can escalate conflict. Diplomacy should go hand in hand. Transparency and transition support. Governments should give advance notice of tariff changes and help industries adapt. A story can make the abstract real. Here are two illustrative vignettes. Example A. A smartphone from overseas. Imagine you're in country X and you love brand Z smartphones. The phone is assembled using parts from China, Taiwan, and Europe. Then, a major market like the US imposes tariffs on one of the key components, say, microchips. The chip manufacturer raises prices to buyers, including the phone maker. As production costs rise, the phone maker increases its sale price globally. The importer in your country passes it along. Result: your next upgrade costs more, and maybe delays in availability appear. Example B. A regional textile exporter. Suppose a Southeast Asian country exports garments to the US. Suddenly, the US imposes a 40% tariff on textiles from that region. Export orders shrink. Textile factories reduce output or close. Local suppliers of dye, fabric, machinery suffer. Worker layoffs reduce local demand. The government may retaliate, disrupting further trade. Meanwhile, the global supply of affordable garments shrinks, pushing up prices elsewhere. These examples show how the origin of the shock, tariff, is distant, but the impact is local and personal. No discussion is complete without addressing counterpoints or limitations. Lag in impact. Tariff effects don't always hit overnight. It can take months or more for costs to move through supply chains. Partial absorption by firms. Some companies may absorb portions of the tariff cost, reducing profit margins, rather than passing it fully to consumers. Tariff exemptions and carve-outs. Governments often exempt certain goods, negotiate waivers, or lower rates for key inputs. That softens the blow. Substitution effects. Consumers may switch to domestic alternatives, limiting the overall price increase. Monetary policy offset. Central banks may counter inflation from tariffs via interest rate actions. Global complexity. Real-world trade has mitigation. Trade deals, rules of origin, supply chain adjustments, all of which moderate pure tariff effects. But these factors don't nullify the effects. They just shape the scale and timing. If tariffs are going to shape your economic landscape, here are key signals to watch. Announcements of new or higher tariffs. Policy changes are often preceded by statements, investigations, or draft proposals. Trade negotiation updates/trade agreements. Free trade agreements, WTO rulings, and bilateral deals can open or close doors. Publisher/business earnings reports. Companies often mention how tariffs or import costs affect their margins or pricing. Input cost changes/commodity markets. Watch steel, oil, rare earths, semiconductors, price shocks, their echo through many products. Currency fluctuations/inflation reports. Sharp movements may reflect tariff-driven capital or trade pressures. Export volumes and trade balance shifts. Declines in exports or growing trade deficits hint at tariff impacts. By staying alert, you can anticipate which sectors you might be hit in: electronics, fashion, autos, etc. Tariffs may seem distant, political, academic, or headline news, but as we've seen, their effects trickle down into product prices, job markets, trade flows, inflation, and ultimately, your daily life. Even if you live on the opposite side of the world from the US, tariffs imposed there can sway your economy, your choices, and your expenses. So next time you see a headline, "New tariffs on imports announced," remember, it's not just country A versus country B. It's a chain reaction, and you're in the chain. Here's what you can do next. Be more conscious of price hikes and ask why. Support resilient and diversified supply chains, locally and globally. Follow trade policy news, not just politics, but the economy behind it. Engage in conversation social platforms on how trade policy affects your region.